Hey everybody, welcome back to watchNcarry. We've got another customer mod for you today. This cool Casio GShock is coming in from Greg, so we just want to thank him for entrusting his watch to me. And the mod that he would like me to do is converting the factory negative display to a positive. So negative is where you have that black background with the white or goldish numerals, and positive is where you have the gray or white background with the black numerals. Now this is a solar watch. You can see it says, let's see if I can zoom in here. It says tough solar there right at the 12 o'clock position. So this mod will not affect the solar charging at all. You are perfectly still able to charge this watch after the mod, as well as if you decide that you want to go back to negative. The mod is reversible. You can go negative to positive, positive to negative, vice versa, and it will not affect the solar charging. The solar charging, by the way, is done by these cells around the perimeter of the display, and the only thing that we're going to be modifying is the internal or inside display, so we're not touching any of these solar panels or cells. Okay, so you want to make sure you have a nice soft work surface, so I have a silicone pad over here. We have a raised lip on this glass, nice little bezel there, so I'm okay to just kind of set this watch down and give myself some clearance here by removing the bracelet. Very cool matte finish on this bracelet, by the way. Really love these models. So I am going to the clasp on this one. Going to take a punch tool over here. You can also take a small paper clip and push in and separate the little pin there, and that spring bar will pop out. Keep track of your spring bar. I'm just going to kind of line up all my parts here. Now let's go right to left to keep everything in frame. Okay, so now we've got full access here, but if you look on this watch, we have these little guards here that are for your wrist comfort, so we can't really open up that case back without removing the rest of the bracelet. So on some watches, you remove the bracelet by removing these two screws and the opposite sides as well. But in this case, I can see we have a couple of spring bars here. So I believe we have to get to the spring bars, but we can leave those other screws in place to get the two halves of the bracelet off. So take your spring bar tool. It has a little fork at the end there, and gently pry inward and separate, and sure enough we have the bracelet popping off. I like to lift one end up, the other end is still attached, and then I'll slide this bracelet in the opposite direction. You don't want to tug up because you're going to bend the spring bar, and then you're also going to bend the resin or plastic over here. It's not metal, so it's relatively easy to chip and bend if you don't remove that properly. Repeat for the other side as well. And those two spring bars I'm also going to remove because they are quite loose. And those two spring bars are a different size than the one that I used on the clasp. So if you look over here, I believe they're a completely different length. Let me, yeah, different length. So you won't get those three confused. Okay, so now that we have the case back exposed, we're going to take a small screwdriver here and get these four fasteners off. These four screws are interchangeable, so don't worry about mixing these up. There you go. Let me just turn the watch over to get orientation. Okay, so the 12 o'clock is here on the top. And then we can open up our case back slowly. Okay, and we want to check to make sure that the O-ring is not sticking halfway between the case and the other half on the case back. What will sometimes happen is like half of this O-ring might stick over here and the other half over here, and then as you pull on this, you might actually stretch the O-ring. You probably won't break it, but you'll stretch it just enough that it will no longer fit into its little trough here. So you want to check if it is sticking to both parts of the watch. You just want to take something thin and just lightly, separate the O-ring from its position. And so I'm going to remove this because when you reassemble the watch, you need to put the O-ring on the case first. And we'll set that off to the side. There we go. And what I'm doing here is, as I'm disassembling this watch, oops, sorry about that, I am laying out all my parts left to right here, so that way it makes it a little bit easier for you guys to follow when it comes to reassembly. Case back goes on top. Next we have this gray piece here. You'll notice that we have these little nubs here on the top and on the sides, but we don't have them on the back. So the nubs are going to be facing you when you reassemble. Okay, then we have this thin black film here on the back. Notice the half moon white shape on one side and nothing on the other. Again, this is kind of how my parts look left to right. Okay, make sure you avoid touching this part right here, that copper colored part. Turning the watch now on its side. This is the 12 o'clock. I'm going to take a small spring bar tool and just pry up from the 6 o'clock position to lift up the module. And we can just lift that out of place, set that to the side, and then immediately take our case back, replace it to limit the amount of dust that's going into that case, and set that off to the side. And this is where we're at right now. Okay, now this is a soft work area. I like to get a little bit more protection here when I'm working with the module, which is this part right here. Now what we need to get to is the main display, and to do that we actually have to open this. Let's see if that's enough zoom for you. Let's move the camera just a tad. Okay, so we're now going to separate this apart by using a spring bar tool again and prying down on these clips. So this clip here, that one, this one, that one, and that one. And as you're doing that, you're going to separate the battery from the display, and so the display will flicker a little bit and then it'll disappear. So we're just going to stick in our spring bar tool and lightly push, or lightly twist to kind of separate it like so. So you can see how it's separated here versus attached here. Okay, and just work your way around the rest of the module. There's our flicker for the display. Okay, now it's completely unclipped. Now you have these two springs here at the bottom. You want to keep track of those as you open up the module. It's okay if they fall apart, but they are important because they have to do with the solar charging. They actually interact with these two white points here on the inside of the case. So we will lift up gently on this, turn it over. Okay, and let's take a look at what we have now. Another reason why I like to put an extra piece of cloth down, especially one that provides a lot of contrast to the color of the display, is oftentimes with these G-Shocks you have springs that fall off. And so in this case we have these two obvious ones here. 1 and 2. Okay, those are the two that were poking out from earlier. But you also have these really tiny ones here. Okay. And here, and I think there are 2 more. So, yep, there's 1 more here. So those would be really easy to miss if I didn't have this, blue towel. And so I'm gonna carefully look at everything to find those springs before I start moving things around. And those little springs, by the way, that I'm picking up, the really tiny ones, they're going into these positions. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4 holes, and I see 1, 2, 3 springs. I should have 4 springs here. I'm going to lift up on this part, turn it over, and there we go. There is our last spring. And you want to grab these springs really gently. I'm using plastic tweezers here, and I'm just barely gripping them. What happens is if you grip too hard, the tweezers will kind of slip because the spring itself is slippery, and it'll fire that spring across the room. These 2 guys are not so hard to find. These 4 are nearly impossible, especially because the rest of my room is hardwood. It's the same kind of brown color. So you just want to keep track of all of those. Okay. The rest of this circuit board, I don't think there's anything I have to worry about on this side. Let me take a look here. Sometimes there's an extra spring for the speaker, but I think there's just a metal tab instead. Yeah, so that looks good. Put that back and set this to the side like so. And I'm going to take all of these springs and just carefully put them away. Sometimes these baby ones, you don't even have to touch, you don't have to squeeze the tweezer, you can just like lightly touch it, and see that the tweezer will just pick it up and just guide it to where you're going to store the rest of your hardware. Okay, so for now, those little springs, I have them in those little troughs, or those little sections right there. Okay, I feel so much better when I get those springs out of the way. They are such a pain to work with and so very important. So just work nice and slow, have some good light above you. Okay, now we want to get to this display, so we have this tiny part here on the top. I think we can get to that later. Let's see. Grab my guitar pick here. There we go. Just gently lift from the side and pull this part off. Okay, then you have these 2 parts here. One and 2, different sizes, so they can only go in specific areas, which makes it easy. When we reassemble, and then lift up, or maybe at this point we can just push. Yep, just push from the back with something not sharp, the display. Take one last look at this part. Okay, one thing to point out here, speaking from prior experience, is you see these 2 little metal contacts here and here. So those interact with the 4 baby springs that we talked about earlier. but these parts can actually pop off as well. And they go back in, not a problem if they come off for you, but for me, I'm just gonna leave them as is, but keep your eye on it. When you are moving this part, you wanna be very gentle and always work over your work area. Don't move this over your lap or anywhere else, because if you drop those, they're also very difficult to find. And also very difficult to orient. The orientation of those is also important. So let's carefully set that off to the side. Okay, now we can work on our display. Now what you're looking at here is essentially 3 different layers that have been attached together. So I'm going to use my 3 fingers on the side to kind of represent the 3 layers. So right now you're looking at it at this view. If I turn this to the side, you're going to see 3 different layers. The topmost layer that's facing you is going to be represented by this finger, and that is called the polarizing film. And what we're going to be doing in this particular mod is we're going to be wedging a guitar pick in between the polarizing film here and the middle layer, moving our guitar pick through here to separate it out. We're then going to clean up any glue that was used to adhere this side. Then we're going to take a brand new polarizing film, put it on, turn it 90 degrees to the left or to the right to give the positive display conversion, and then reassemble the watch. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, how do you find this top polarizing layer? It's easy when I have my fingers being held, but when you have very thin layers like this, it's relatively difficult. So what you're going to do is take your guitar pick on the top polarizing film, kind of drag it, and then you're going to hear it drop to the middle layer. So let me show you what that looks like and what it sounds like. You can hear that click. That's me jumping to that middle layer. So once you jump to that middle layer, you're going to wedge your guitar pick in. Now before we do that, as I mentioned, there is glue underneath the polarizing film. So we need to not only use a little bit of mechanical advantage with the guitar pick, we want to use a little bit of chemical to loosen that glue. And what we're going to be using is a small bowl here of Goo Gone. So I start off this mod by taking my display, taking a Q-tip, a little bit of Goo Gone, saturating the Q-tip, and just going around the entire perimeter of that display, and then letting that sit for 5 minutes. And what you're basically doing is you're allowing glue to get just at this beginning part. It'll hopefully loosen the glue up a bit, so that way it's a little bit easier for the pick to find its way in. Otherwise, if the glue is too firm, the pick may find that layer, but it may have a hard time engaging and cutting into it. All right, so I'm going to pause the video here for 5 minutes and come back. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes here. Let's go ahead and take our guitar pick. Let's get some Goo Gone on the side of that there. Go to any of these corners. So I'm going to work here at the top and just find that middle, or find that little jump, and then start to wedge your guitar pick in there. You want to make sure that your display is pressed firmly down onto the table. You don't want to be doing this in the air, because if you put any kind of bending pressure on this display while it's being held up in the air, you could break it. At least you are supporting it down with the flat side, with the flatness of the table. And then just guide your guitar pick. Oh, good. Nice and easy to find this one. So you can see right there, we were able to pick up that edge, and now we can remove the rest of the filter. Now, sometimes what will happen is that the guitar pick won't work. What you can do is maybe shave the guitar pick a little bit more, clean up the shavings, dip some Goo Gone into the tip again, and try that. If that still doesn't work, you can take something like a small hobby knife here, and no need to get it soaked in Goo Gone. Curl your nails, find that same edge with the blade, and just hold the blade as parallel as you can to your work surface and guide it in there just to catch that initial edge. Once you catch that initial edge, you switch to the guitar pick and guide it the rest of the way through. You can guide this blade all the way through to remove the entire polarizing film, but it's just a safety issue both for you and for the rest of the watch. So once you get that edge picked up, finish it off with the guitar pick. So here's that pick. And we are just slowly rocking this back and forth. Let me zoom in for you. I'm supporting the back of the display with my finger there, so I'm not bending it, and just rock this back and forth. It's the nice thing about the pick, you have that rounded edge, which makes it really easy. Try to get it off in one piece. Okay, and there you go. That is the polarizing film that has been removed. So, from the factory, what Casio decided to do is they decided to make this negative. Now, if Casio had oriented this polarizing film 90 degrees to the right or 90 degrees to the left, and of course, change the shape to fit that, it would have been positive. So when you do a positive to negative or negative to positive display conversion, all you're really doing is taking out the polarizing film, reorienting it, and putting a new one on there. The reason we can't reuse this filter, number one, is because there's too much glue on the back here. Even if I could remove that glue, it's going to get scratched because it is very, very easy to scratch this thin film. And of course, the most important part is in the new orientation, it doesn't fit, right? It only fits in one orientation. So we are not going to be reusing this film. We can toss this out. And you can see here lots of glue to remove. Right, so again, we're going to be using some chemical and mechanical advantage. Let's start with the chemical first. Take a Q-tip again and soak it in Goo Gone, and we are just going to dab the Goo Gone everywhere. We're not going to rub it out yet. Just let it sit, let it do its job for another 5 minutes. I can already tell that there's quite a lot of glue on this one, so I'm going to actually let it sit for 10 minutes. I think that'll work a little bit better, make our job a little bit easier. Let that sit and we will check back. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes here. We can grab a new Q-tip, soak it in Goo Gone, and then now we can start to loosen the Goo Gone with the Q-tip. I'm constantly re-lubricating the Q-tip here. And then once you feel like you've got a few clumps of the glue together, you can go to your microfiber towel, which is what I'm working over right now. This is clean, obviously, and really, really soft. And then just gently but firmly rub away that glue. I like to push from the center out on all sides, so you'll notice I'm rotating the display as I'm doing this, and you'll see that the glue right there is coming off. Now this one has a lot of glue and it's really sticky. It's really odd because sometimes I'll have the same exact model watch and the glue is not so much. It'll come off with the old polarizing film and there won't be that much left. Some cases like this, there's a lot of it left. So when there's a lot like this, I could just keep, rubbing this Q-tip over it. But again, to make your work easier and to let the chemical do its job, I'm just going to soak this again and let this sit for another 10 minutes. Now, if after that first rubbing with the Q-tip and the towel, like almost all of it gets removed and it looks really clean, go ahead and just, stop right there, keep going, get the display clean. What we're looking for is to have the display completely clean of glue. You want to rotate it underneath the direct light and you don't want to see any glue clumps at all. So if you can get there in one pass or two passes, that's fine. In this case, I think it's going to take a few. So I'll check back in another 10 minutes. Okay, so let's continue here. Again, Q-tip, Goo Gone. You can also use a goof off, by the way. And let's rotate our towel. Now you notice that while I'm doing this, you don't really hear any squeaking sounds. So if you can kind of picture like a clean piece of glass and you have, let's say, a wet finger running down it, that little sound that it would make, that's what we're trying to get with this display. Because when we start hearing that that screeching sound with our towel, that tells us that we've removed a lot of the glue already, and we are down to the clean display. So this looks clean, but again, rotate in the light and you can see lots of glue. So it's pretty clean here in the center. Too much brightness. Let's dial that down a bit. There we go. It's having a hard time focusing, sorry. There we go. But if we rotate this in the light, you'll see we still have lots of glue. So we're gonna keep doing this again. Once your Q-tip gets kind of worn down from rubbing on the display, make sure you change it out for a fresh one, because you don't want to be grinding the harder root of the Q-tip onto that. All right, new Q-tip here. Let's focus a little bit more away from the center. Looks a little bit better. Still have some glue here on the sides. So to save some time in this video, I'm going to pause here, but you're basically just going to do the same thing. So just rub your glue gun, take your towel, wipe the glue off, check it in the direct light, rotate it. If there's any more glue, repeat again. So I'll pause here and check back in once it's all clean. Okay, so we have this display almost clean. Let me kind of show you what it sounds like when you get the glue off. So now as we're rubbing, there. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera. Yeah, I can barely hear it here in person, but there's more of that squeaky sound that you can hear, which tells us that we are down to the bare glass and have removed that glue. So let's get this dried off here. And let's take a look at this. So as we rotate this, you want to check everywhere to make sure that the glue is completely gone. Okay, and this looks really good. Okay, so now with our display completely clean, you're going to want to get a clean towel here. So I'll switch to the other side here. And then you want to clean your hands because that Goo Gone is pretty sticky, gets everywhere. Okay, with our fingers clean, actually let's switch back to the blue towel because I think the yellow is a little bit hard for you guys to see on camera. It's much better for the eyes for you guys. Okay, so now what we want to do is cut out our polarizing film. So we'll set our display off to the side. By the way, this is what all the parts kind of look like, left to right. So I have the bracelet here to the left off camera. You've got the O-ring and all the other parts here, and then our springs and hardware are there at the top. Okay, so actually, let's bring back the display so I can explain the polarizing film. So we are going to be replacing that top layer that we cut off, right? So you're going to get polarizing film. This is linear 0-degree polarizing film. This is the non-adhesive version. This also comes in an adhesive version, in which case one side is almost like a sticker. I prefer non-adhesive just because it's much easier to lay it down and less chance of getting air bubbles. So the first thing you want to do when you get your polarizing film is identify the correct side that you need to be on. So there's this side and there's this side. So the easiest way to tell is just kind of hold the film over the display, rotate it, and if you see any gradient, funky colors like that, you see those greens, purples, blues, then you're on the wrong side. So we're going to flip this over, and then we're going to rotate again. And now I see only whites and blacks, and so that's the correct side to be on. All right, so usually what I do is, as I'm working down my way on this film, I'll just go to like a area that I probably won't use for a mod, and I'll just put a little check mark there. And that check mark will tell me that this is the right side of the film to be on. Of course, you can see that check mark from the other side, but it's much duller on this side and much more vibrant on the side that you wrote on. So this tells me that this is the side I need to be on. So now that we have the correct side, we need to figure out which orientation do we cut this filter out in. So usually it's in 90 degrees. So there is the negative that we started with. If I go 90 degrees to the right, we have a positive. Let's go back. How about 90 degrees to the left? Positive again. And how about a full 180 degrees? Negative. All right. So again, when you have a positive or negative display from the factory, all they're doing is they're making a choice at the factory to lay it down in this orientation or this orientation. So now that we have the correct orientation that we're going to be on, if you have a polarizing film that is misshaped, like it's a circle, it's kind of hard to identify edges because this one has still a 90-degree angle. Just look for the whitest white if you want positive, or look for the blackest black if you want negative. So this is the whitest white. I'm going to kind of lay this down over here. Okay, then we're going to take our case, remove the case back, and flip that over. And then what I'm going to do is cut out a shape of polarizing film that is a little bit larger than the display. So that way it will extend beyond the visible area. This is the visible area here. It will extend beyond that. And then I can put some glue tape here at the top and adhere the polarizing film to it. So again, there is our orientation, correct? But because this is going to be flipped inside the case, we need to take our film, flip it back over, because that's how it's going to be laid down. So hopefully that makes sense for you. Then you're going to take your Sharpie again. A fine tip Sharpie is the easiest. And just trace out the shape you want. Now I'm just going to trace out a shape that fits inside this internal area, but I want the polarizing film to be above these two dots. If you cover these two dots, you're going to cover their connection with the springs, and then you will no longer have the solar charging feature. So you want to make sure that those two dots are left uncovered. So let's put my film there. And this polarizing film, by the way, is made also of 3 layers. There's a protective layer on the back, a protective layer on the front, and the film in the middle. So it's okay for me to draw on either side because those 2 protective layers will be peeled off before the watch is reassembled. Okay, so let's draw our shape here at the top. Let's get the Sharpie started here. There we go. Just a rough shape, doesn't have to be exact. Just like that. Okay, now this is the side that should be facing me when I reinstall. This is the back side. So I just like to write some kind of indicator that this tells me this is the side that should be facing me when I reinstall it. Again, I know you can view it from this side, but it's duller on that side and more vibrant on this side. So that tells me that this is the way I should be laying down this film after it's cut out. Okay, once that film is cut out, go ahead and cover your case again just to limit the dust going in. Set our display to the side, and let's cut this out. There we go. There's our film. Let's cut off a few of these Sharpie marks here. Okay, and let's test fit this into the case. Okay, so it definitely fits inside the case. Now you can see that there is this silver part on the inside, and then actually it's hard to see on camera, it drops down like 0.5 millimeter to a lower dark part. So I want the filter to actually be about the size of the lower dark part. The reason is if it's a little bit too large and it sits as it is, like this, it's going to rest on the silver part, and then it won't be as flush with the display when I reassemble. So I want to cut this. Actually, I have a lot to cut out on this. So what I'm going to do is just kind of position it. I have openings here for the 2 contact points, so that's good. Let's go back to my Sharpie again and just kind of mark off the areas that we can cut. So let's hold this in place from the bottom so it doesn't move. Let's cut off here. There we go. Cover this back up again. There we go. Take our case again, and let's try it again. right, much better fitment. So this looks perfect. I think I'm going to leave it this way. What I'm checking for here is obviously that I am covering beyond the visible area. So when I mean visible area, I mean this area here, right? The part that you see when the watch is reassembled. If your film was the exact size of that visible area, then as you turn the watch to the side, you're going to see the bare display, right? Because it won't be covered by polarizing film. So the polarizing film needs to be a little bit larger than the visible area. I have my 2 contacts here that are still left uncovered, which is great. And I have a nice border here on top, right, where I can put some double-sided sticky tape, so that way we can adhere this polarizing film down. So for me, this is a great size, and I'm just going to set this to the side for now. Let's go ahead and put some polarizing film here on the top. Again, these are where the solar cells are on the watch. It will not affect the charging at all as long as you are putting glue tape here, here, or here, even here, but you definitely don't want to cover these 2 contacts at the bottom. So for double-sided tape, I'm going to use this brand here, T-Rex. I'm going to put a link in the description below for a separate video on how to apply the tape, because I'm going to be cutting it off camera. And let's get a pretty long, thin strip there for the top. And I like to apply it with a small blade. And because we have the solar cells at the bottom, I'm not going to touch the blade to the back of this. I'm just going to lay the left side of this tape down and gently touch it with a toothpick, and then just kind of roll my blade off so the blade never touched the solar cell. Right? And then you can lightly kind of tap that down. Now, in my opinion, I know I've done it in other videos where I put tape on each side. I think it's actually best to just put it on one side. The reason is, if you put it on 4 sides and you stick it down, sometimes it doesn't stick completely taut, the film, and then you'll have these like little waves or little wrinkles. By putting it on one side, you're ensuring that that film is not going to move anywhere. Plus, all of the module on top of it is really squeezing it down, so it's not going anywhere. This really is not necessary. You can just put that polarizing film straight in without the double-sided tape and everything would be fine. It's just really added security for me, so that way if a customer decides to change their battery and they accidentally pop out the module, that polarizing film is not going to pop out with it. It's going to stay in place. So that being said, you really need to only secure it in one place. I think that is best. So now that that polarizing film is there, we can go ahead and take our, now that that tape is there, we can take our polarizing film. And again, this is the side that's facing us. We're going to peel the protective backing on this side and then lay that film down. But before we do that, we want to make sure that we don't have any dust on the inside of this case. So take something of high contrast that makes it easy to find dust, like a black background like this. Kind of hold the case over it and check in the light for any dust. You can take an air duster like this and just squeeze. Hold this upside down while you're squeezing this and just try to get out all the dust from inside the case. And then check again. Now, some of these dust particles that I can see, they might be on the outside of the case. So I take a blunt toothpick and I just gently touch it. And if it doesn't move, that tells me it's on the inside of the case and I have to keep going with the duster. Okay, and that looks great. So now let's take our film. Let's set this off to the side. Carefully peel the front side of it, and then once you peel that off, make sure you don't touch it. I know there's some people that really are curious why I don't wear gloves. My customers are all aware. In fact, almost all of them have seen videos of me assembling watches, so they know that I don't wear them, but I am very cautious about my fingerprints But if you choose to wear gloves, completely understand that. You can also get those fingertip gloves. They just limit your dexterity, so things like removing films and applying glue tape can be a little bit tougher, but it is possible. So I removed the front side of that polarizing film. There it is. I'm going to gently grab the bottom now with my tweezers and check for dust one more time, and then lay this down on top. I'm not going to push down on that yet. I'm going to check to make sure that that really is seated properly where I need it to go. And then once it looks good, I can go ahead and use something blunt and soft and just gently push on that tape so that it will stick. You'll see the tape getting darker. It'll stick to the polarizing film. Now, one thing I forgot to mention here is that make sure your tape, you'll see that the edge of the tape is right here and the edge of the visible area is here. So there's a little gap in between the edge of the tape and the edge of the visible area. You want there to be like a millimeter or more gap, because if it's right flush with each other, you're going to see that tape when the watch is reassembled. Okay, so now that that's in place, we want to assemble our module and leave this alone for now. I'm going to leave that protective backing on the back in place and come back to that. And now we need to reassemble everything that we removed. This is one of the more difficult modules to assemble, and it's really just because of those springs, especially those 4 baby ones. So again, you know, be very slow, be very careful working with this. Try to avoid using tweezers if possible, because, you know, you shoot those springs across and it is very difficult to find. So I'm going to get my display here and let's look at our layout before we start so you can kind of organize and follow along with me. So zoom out a little bit more. Okay, so this is what we have so far. I have my display here. It's going to be laid down in this orientation with that little rectangular box at the top right. Let's zoom back in. Okay. Go ahead and grab this piece right here. Be very careful. Again, you want to make sure that these 2 black pieces here are at the, you know, almost like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position. And then secondly, you want to make sure that these silver contacts are there on the left at the 9 o'clock and here on the left at like the 7 o'clock. See that silver? 1, 2, 1 and 2. They come off as a pair, so these 2 will come off and these 2 will come off, but you want to make sure that they are both laid in that position. Okay, with them laid in that position, you are going to take your display in this orientation. See the rectangle there at the top right. Flip it over and insert that into the back of the white plastic piece, and be very gentle laying this down. You don't want to just let it drop because it'll send those little contacts flying all over the place. As long as what I'll do is I'll take a toothpick here, rest one edge on the toothpick, and just slowly guide it down like so. Okay, let's see. Let's try this the other way. Let's lay it in from the right side first and guide it down on the left. Okay. Now, the screen has a tendency to rest. Let's see if I can zoom this in. You see the 2 black foam pieces, one here and one here? The display has a tendency to rest on top. You don't want it to rest on top. You want it to rest to the side, and then you want it to be pushing on the side of those foam pieces. So that's why I'm laying down the top right first, kind of pushing it towards that area, and then laying down the glass on the left. And then of course, that little movement sent this little piece flying, so we're gonna have to put that back. That's one of the two contacts. Maybe that's a good thing it came off, so I can show you guys how to reattach that. But we can get to that later. We need this display flush, so you can see it's still sitting a little bit higher on this side. This is the 6 o'clock, this is the 12 o'clock, by the way. So we need to push this display in. A little bit more. There we go. Oh wait, no, gotta do it again. There we go. Okay, finally. So we got that in, and then if I take a look here, see if I can get that on camera for you. I don't know if you can see that, but you'll notice like that part of the display is not resting on top because you can clearly see the black. All right, so you should still clearly see those two black pieces, but the display should be pushing on the side of them, the inner side of them. So lay this down. Again, this is the 12, this is the 6. You have those two dots at the bottom for your landmark. And now we have this contact here that needs to be put back into place. So grab your tweezers, lift up, and let me see if I can explain this clearly. So this needs to go there. Now the problem is, does it go in this orientation, right? I know the silver has to be facing me, so it's pretty easy to identify. Let's move this into focus. It's pretty easy to identify which is the silver part and which is not. So that's silver, and the other side of that is completely different color, right? So that is the wrong side. I need to be on that side. But now do I put it in this orientation, or is it 180 degrees in this orientation? And it does matter. So you want to, let's look at the one that's already installed. Okay, you'll notice that in between the two silver contacts, there's like a middle portion. And I know you guys can't see this on camera because I don't have a macro lens, but this middle portion here that connects the two contacts, there's a white band and like a yellowish band. The white band is facing the inside, and so I'm going to make sure that when I put this part back in, the white band is facing the inside as well. And of course, when you reassemble the watch and you find out that the display is not working, it's a bummer, but that just means that you need to reverse it. So worst comes to worst, you just rewind back and you flip it over. So let's see here if I can find this. Yeah, I think it should be this way. Okay, I'm going to take a small magnifying glass here. And let me just look. I know you guys won't be able to see it on camera. This is really just for me. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, then we're going to zoom out just a bit, take this part, okay, and you want to orient it in such a way that you have these two little holes on the 9 o'clock and the two little holes at the 7. And then you're going to go to this part, and you can already see what's going to match, right? These two parts will go over these two contacts, and these two parts will go over these two contacts here. So again, you don't want to just plop this down, because you can see any small vibration in here or bump is going to cause those two contacts to go flying. So I'm going to lay down the left side first over those contacts, and then set a toothpick and gently guide the rest of that down, like so. Okay, let me check again. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so now those two sensitive areas are being held down by that piece we just put in place, so that's gives me much better peace of mind. Now we have this small cutout here at the top. We're going to take this part. Remember, you have two sizes for this. A smaller one goes at the top, and you're going to turn it so that the thin side is facing down, and just gently lay that on top and tap it down into place, and then repeat for the bottom. Like so. All right, now we need to, let's see. This would ideally be the next part, but we need to put our springs into place first, because I think, does that cover the spring? Oh, I guess we can put this part in first. Okay, so now we have this part, the white part. You want to orient it in this fashion, and then lay that down on top. Oh, I think I'm doing this wrong. Sorry. Orient it like this. And then lay that down. There we go. Much better. Okay, now the difficult part. So we're going to be working with the 4 springs here, the baby ones. So that's these 4 here. Now, I would highly recommend you do not use tweezers. What I like to take is an old blade. This is clean, but this is an old blade. It's just been used in a flame. That's why it looks the way it does, but it's not dirty. I'm not putting anything dirty into the customer's watch. The reason I'm using an old blade is usually the burr on the blade is a little bit rougher. It's not as fine. It's not as sharp. And those little burrs are just enough to kind of catch the spring, especially these baby ones, and hold them into place. So I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I'm just going to lightly touch that spring, and oftentimes it'll pick it up. So again, I'm working over a blue mat area here to make it easier for visibility, especially if I drop that spring. But do you see how I'm holding that spring at the very tip? I think it's just grabbing onto that burr of the blade. And then we're going to position these into these 4 holes. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let me use a pointer here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are all the same size, all 4 springs. Both sides are the same, so it doesn't matter like if you put one side in versus the other. You're just going to lay all 4 inside those little holes and it helps to have a little other tool here, like a toothpick, to kind of guide it in place. And really use very minimal, if little pressure at all, because again, a little pressure, you compress the spring, you remove your pressure, and that spring goes flying across the room. So take it slow, and let's get these 4 inserted here. I apologize if you are not able to see this clearly. This is probably as zoomed in as I can get without the picture being too blurred. One. Two. Three. And 4. Okay. Whew. Okay, if you can get that in, you are awesome. I think you have just done 75% of the job right there. Those are the hardest parts of this mod to do. Okay, now we've got 2 larger springs, which will be a cakewalk, considering what you've just finished. Now these ones, on the other hand, are different. These do have a different side. So you'll notice that you have one side that's a little bit thicker and fuller and thicker. I'm sorry, thicker and fuller, and another side that's thinner. So you're going to want to insert the thinner side down. So we're going to grab it by the thick end here and put it into that little hole at the bottom. And repeat for the other one. There we go. Okay, so very, very gentle, minimal movements with this piece, because the slightest vibration will send those 4 springs off again. Set that to the right. Take this part here, and you want to have it in this orientation, especially having these 2 small gold contacts at the bottom, because those will contact these 2 here. And you can see that these 2 small contacts here and here are going to contact these 2 here. Now the way to insert this is to not really move this part. Leave that the way it is. Take this part, turn it over. Again, this is the orientation. Flip it over. Make sure you're pinching the side so that the circuit board doesn't drop. And then you want to target this little clip here with that clip over there. And then once you make contact, you want to push with your other finger, stick that clip in, and then hold, and then secure with your other finger the rest of the clips. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to insert this down slowly. Again, I'm focusing on the clip on the left. Okay, it's lined up. It's clipped in. I'm holding that clip, and now I'm going to the others and trying to get those to clip in as well. Okay, maintain pressure at all times, because if you have any pressure that relieves on one side, that may give enough room for the springs to jump up. Okay, and then now, again, holding this in place, I'm going to just visually look at the side to make sure that the clips are in. So that clip is in. I'm going to rotate this gently. Okay, those 2 clips are in. Maintaining pressure. Clip is in, and clip is in. Okay, so now I can let go. Whew, okay, I'm hoping this was done correctly. Now we're going to flip this over, no problem. We have those 2 springs popping out, and just make sure you don't have any baby springs that fell off. So big springs are at the bottom there. Have your watch case in front of you in this orientation. This is the 6 o'clock position. We're going to lift up on this. Okay. And then we're going to again check quickly for any dust. Okay, nothing there. And then I'm going to peel away this protective layer on the back. So that comes off. Looks great. Take this part, go away from your work area, get your duster. Give that a light dusting. Take this part, flip it over, and insert into the watch. Now what will end up happening is these 4 buttons are attached to stems, and the stems push on the module. That's how the watch interacts with the module. So making sure to avoid touching that copper part, you want to put some light pressure over the battery. And to make sure that the stems are pushing onto the module properly, you're going to push inward on these silver tabs. You see this really thin silver part here, and here, and here, and here. You want to put pressure with this finger while pushing in on those little tabs. And you'll feel the module sit down as you do that. In fact, you might need to use a blade because it's thinner. and then rotate. Keep pressure with your left finger. Push in, push in. Recheck the other side. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then what you can do is just keep some light pressure with this finger, push the button, and you'll see that tab is moving. That's a good sign. That tab is moving. That one is moving. And that one is moving. Again, the tab is just that silver piece of thin metal right there. Okay, so this looks fully set to go. Now we want to reassemble as much of this as possible. So take this part and put it down in this orientation. You're going to want those two metal contacts to pop up through, 1 and 2. Take the gray, make sure the little gray nubs are facing towards you. And again, insert on top. Make sure the metal contacts are also pointing through those. Forget about the O-ring for now. I'm just going to take my case back, loosely put it on, and then, oh, I am sorry. Take that off. Very, very sorry. We need to do an all clear first on the battery or the module. Get back to this part. Take a paper clip, bend it in a U shape, have one end a little bit longer than the other. Look for a hole that's marked as AC. So on this watch, okay. You see how there's the AC here? There we go. And it's pointing towards that. And then the negative sign is right there. Your two paper clips are going to bridge those two areas. The longer end of the paper clip is going to go into the deeper hole of the AC. And then you're going to hold that bridge for about 10 seconds. Okay. Then put some pressure on the battery. Again, avoid touching this part here. Flip it over and your display should be visible. Okay, if it's not, we might need to do the AC a little bit longer. Okay, let's reassemble this. Sorry, I tried to zoom in. I pressed stop recording by accident. So lay your black piece in. Oh, again, we did the paper clip. We held it to the hole marked AC, and this time I held it for a little bit longer, like 15 seconds. And then put the black piece in, put the gray piece in, and hopefully when we flip this over, the display will come back on. Sometimes what could happen is the display fails to come back on because the battery's discharged, but you can see at the beginning of the video that we had a full functioning display, so that wasn't the issue. So if you're going to do this mod, make sure your solar cells are fully charged, your battery's fully charged before you do the mod, because otherwise you won't be able to tell at the end when you reassemble it if the battery is discharged. So I'm going to hold that in place and then flip this over. Oh, perfect. Always get a little bit worried every time I do a mod and I don't see what I want to see. Okay, so holding the case back in place, going to kind of check this mod out, or check the display out and just make sure that everything looks good. First thing I want to check. Number one, I want to check that all my letters and all my numerals are complete. Sometimes if you don't do a proper all clear or don't assemble the parts correctly, you know, like the bottom of the T or the top of the 1, they might not be visible. In this case, it is nice and visible, which is great. I'm going to rotate this up, down, left, and right to make sure that the positive display is fully covered. Remember, we put a new polarizing film in here. So if you cut your polarizing film too short, you're going to be able to see that cutout on one of these sides. And if you remember, when you wear a watch and you turn it, there is, you know, a brief moment there where you're looking at the inside of the case. I don't want to have the customer see any part of that that is not covered by polarizing film. So that's why I'm kind of checking this all over to make sure that that's fine, and that looks great. Okay, now the functions I could check now, but I'm going to wait to fully assemble the watch before doing that, because that way I can ensure that everything is in place to guarantee that the functions are working properly. All right, so let me take one last look at the little tabs, little metal tabs for the buttons, for the pushers. Okay, those all look good. Okay, let's reassemble everything. Those metal tabs look good. Okay, we're going to take our O-ring next. And let's re-lubricate this. First of all, I want to check to make sure there isn't any debris sticking to it. I'm going to gently lay that down. Take a Q-tip and take some silicone oil. It doesn't really matter which brand or viscosity you buy. Just buy the cheapest one, as long as it says 100% silicone. And then lightly roll your Q-tip over the O-ring and flip it over. Do the same thing there. It should have a nice shine in the direct light to it, as you can see. And then lay our O-ring back. Make sure it fits into that trough. Okay, that looks pretty good. This is the 6 o'clock again, so our case back should be oriented in this way. Go ahead and take that case back and push that directly on while lining up all 4 of those holes. And then you can take your screws here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, loosely insert them just to line up the case back. What we're trying to do here is limit the case back from shifting, because it might roll that O-ring off its track. So line those up, and then just loosely secure these, just enough for the fastener to make contact with the case back. I'm not fully tightening these yet. Okay, and then I'm going to maintain pressure with my finger there, check the seam between the case back and the case to make sure that the O-ring is not being pinched. So that looks good, and then I can fully tighten the screws here. Okay, let's flip this guy over and take a look at our work. So there we go. We have a positive display on this Casio GShock. Now I'm going to also check for dust, fingerprints on the inside of the glass and on the polarizing film. Don't see any. Everything looks good. Let's test the buttons here, bottom left. Go to stopwatch. The sound also tells me that we're making good contact with the case back, because that's where the speaker is. Let's test the bottom right. Bottom right again. Top left to clear. And let's test our backlight. So backlight actually looks brighter in person than it's showing. Oh, there we go. That's why. There we go. That's the backlight. So backlight is working perfectly. Okay, so we are almost done with our mod. We're going to flip this guy over. Again, 12 o'clock is here. I'm going to put the 12 o'clock on this side. And we're going to take our strap here and reattach that. Now, usually what happens is on a bracelet, the part of the clasp that comes down, so you'll see how the bracelet would be like this, right? Oops, like this. So the part of the clasp that comes down, this part, should be coming from the 12 o'clock position, at least traditionally in my experience. So if I open this up, you can see that the part coming down is on the opposite side of this. So this part should be at the 6, and this part should be at the 12. I hope that makes sense. And in this case of this watch, just the way this customer has it laid out, the shorter part of the watch, of the bracelet, is on the 12. The longer part with the clasp is on the 6. So let's attach this side first. So you're going to take your spring bars. We should have 3 of them. 1, 2, and 3. Now 2 of them are going to be going for the bracelet, and they are the same size. The one that is going to be going for the clasp over here at the end is a little bit longer, right? So just line up your spring bars and choose the shorter 2, and then put one of those in. And what I like to do is I like to move that spring bar. Let's see if I can zoom in for you. I like to move that spring bar all the way in. Oops. Kind of hold it like that and position it into the hole for one side. So it's going into that hole on the bottom. You see that? And then I'm going to guide the bracelet into the lug and rest the other part of that spring bar there on the top of the other lug. And then I'm going to take my spring bar tool and pry inward on that spring bar while applying downward pressure with my other finger, and then guiding that spring bar inside the lug housing. And then I'm going to kind of move this bracelet around till I hear a click. If it doesn't click, hold down pressure with one finger and then use your spring bar tool to find the hole. And sometimes you can guide that spring bar in by moving inside to out, right? So I felt it go inside there, and then double check the other side, make sure that that's fully in. And when that's in, go ahead and twist like this, and then pull, and then up and down. Gently but firmly to really stress the bracelet, because that's how it will be on the wrist, to make sure that that spring bar is seated properly inside of its the hole of the lug. We're going to flip this around, and we're going to repeat the same thing for the other side. Again, taking the short spring bar here, putting it inside of our bracelet, moving that spring bar a little bit to one side, supporting it there with my thumb, guide it into the hole for one of the lugs, rest it on the other lug, pry it inward. Okay, stress the bracelet a little bit, and that's good. Now we will take this part over here, attach it to the clasp on this end. Now, I completely forgot which micro adjust. You see that we have 4 micro adjusts here. I believe it was the 3rd one that the customer had this. So what I'm going to do is at the end of this video, I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to look which micro adjust the customer had it on, and I'm going to set it there. So if I get it incorrect in this part of the video, forgive me, but I am going to go back and make sure that I return the watch as I found it to the customer. So I'm just going to put it into the 3rd hole there. Again, resting the lug on one side, and then on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take a spring bar tool. I'm just going to take a toothpick, because this metal is very easy to scratch and very easy to hit with metal. So I'm going to take a toothpick and just gently push in on that spring bar. Try to guide it into place. There we go. And find that third micro adjustment. There we go on that side and the other side. And then again, stress this one too. So pull, twist gently but firmly. Make sure it looks good. Okay, so we are all done. Let's give this a very quick wipe on the outside. Customer has kept this watch pretty clean, which is nice. I don't have to do any cleanup over there. A little bit of dusting. I will set the date and the time to the customer's location before I ship it to them. But for now, let's just take a look at our work. Just cleaning up my work area here. All right. Much easier to read. In my opinion, this is how the watch should be sold. The only time I would think a negative display would be good on this is if the new MIP displays, the MIP, like this particular Casio, the GBD H2000-2, I believe is the model number. This is not your standard negative display. This is called an MIP. That is very crisp. But this came with a regular non-MIP display, so in my opinion, this looks best. And there you go. Now, in some cases, customers like to add a colored filter. If you want to do that, you still have to follow this video. You cannot put a colored filter over a negative display. You can, you just won't see the color that much. You have to convert it to positive first and then put the colored filter on top. So if that's what you want, what you would do in this video is rather than put the polarizing film down onto the glue tape, you're going to put the colored filter first, then you're going to put the polarizing film behind it, and then you're going to put the watch module behind that and then reassemble the watch. All right, guys, so that'll do it for today's video. I want to again thank Greg for entrusting me with his very, very nice Casio G-Shock, as well as all my prior customers. You guys take a big form of trust in sending me your watches. Sometimes you guys send me, regardless of the price, it doesn't matter if it's a $10 watch or a $1,000 watch. Either way, I will treat it the same, but I appreciate you guys trusting me with your property. And hopefully I show you guys the respect and your timepiece the respect that it deserves. And just want to thank him again for his business. If you guys have any comments or questions, please put them down below. I also have an Instagram that I've put in the description. If you could please follow me on that and check out some of my content, that would be greatly appreciated. Any questions about mods or requests, like, I'd like to get this mod done. What's your turnaround time? What's your pricing? Please message me on Instagram. If you can't find me there, message me on Facebook, and I will put my name in the description so that you can type in my name for Messenger. And as always, guys, have fun. Take it slow. This is one of those mods that is very simple and straightforward, but because of those springs, is very, very easy to screw up. And the penalty for failure is expensive. Those springs, I believe, if you were to order separately, you would have to go through like a third-party distributor like Pack Parts, and I don't think they sell them individually. You would have to buy a minimum quantity for the order to be processed, and with shipping that can add up. So just take it slow, have a very big visible work area, preferably somewhere that has borders. If you take a look at my work mat here, I've got these little raised ridges, so that way if a spring rolls off my center area, it doesn't get lost. And then have a place that's designated. It doesn't have to look like this. Just have a designated place or a bowl where you put all your hardware, your springs, your fasteners. A neat, organized work area may take a while for you to set up, and it may slow you down at the beginning, but it's going to make the overall project much more predictable, much safer, and I think over time it's going to make you work much more efficiently. So that'll do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for following. As always, have fun, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.